I decided to do the ball joints on my 1989 F250. But that's not what this video is going to be about. In doing the ball joints, you gotta figure as long as it's apart, I'll do the universals, the wheel bearings, and the spindle bearing. This truck is a heavy-duty F250, so it's got the Dana50 front end, and it has 3 universal joints across the front axle. The 2 nearest the wheels, there's plenty of videos on that, but there's only seems to be talk about how to change the universal nearest the differential for the passenger side. So figured I'd take a video of that and see how that goes. So this is the axle shaft out of the passenger side. I'm going to practice on it using the ball joint press. This is the package you can rent from AutoZone. Use that ball joint press and use it like I would if I was laying on my back trying to get that center U-joint out. Practice on this, try it out underneath. Should be pointed out there's actually nothing wrong with this universal joint. I did notice this had a Zerk fitting on it until I actually cleaned it up a little. But I'm going to change it anyway. This truck is set for 10 years before I got it. And as long as I got everything apart, I'm going to go ahead and put the new stuff in. My Zerk fitting is not going to be in the center. My Zerk fitting is going to be at the end cap. You can get the U-joints that don't have any Zerk fittings at all. They're supposedly stronger because there's no hole drilled in them for the Zerk. But I would rather be able to grease it. So now I'm going to position the ball joint press on there and see if I can pop this thing off of there. So this will be my first attempt. I positioned the ball joint press, as you can see. Turns out this end down here is big enough around that the cap should come right out of there. You know, room for it to come out. Well, I took less than a half a turn using the ratchet, and I heard it pop. And it does look like it's moved somewhat. So we're going to take the ball joint press off of there and see if I can finish it with a hammer, get that bottom cap off. Okay, I hit it once or twice with a hammer. I wasn't happy with that, the way it was going at all. So I put the ball joint press back on there, and it went right down in there. Looks like I'm going to be able to get that cap off without too much trouble. Got to remember, when I try this on the center one, I'm going to be laying on my back, so as long as I can position the press on there, looks like this won't be too much of a problem. Alright, I've repositioned this just so I can see where I'm at without the press on there. That's how much of the cap I've got sticking out. Can't pound it out with the hammer and a socket any farther than that. So I'm going to see if I can pull that cap off with some channel locks or something. Okay, I didn't use channel locks. I tried using vice grips. These are some Irwin vice grips. They're pretty good, but yeah, I could grab a hold of that pretty well, but I couldn't move that cap. What I ended up doing was using a ball peen hammer and knocking the yoke back the other way, forcing that cap out, and giving enough room here. Looks like I'll be able to disassemble this now. So that seems to be the answer there. Oh, and in case you didn't notice, that Zerk fitting, just from all this pounding, that top part broke off. It's not worth messing with now. Okay, I used the vice grips to pull that loose cap off. This cap here, which I initially struggled with, is still in there. I got a 3/4 inch deep well. I'll just knock that out of there and then go to work on the rest of those. Yeah, that came out of there pretty easily. You know, this ball joint press is a pretty handy tool to have around. I may have to get me one of these. I got it set up in the vise now. See if I can pop this one off there. Remember, I'm trying to figure what's this going to be like if I was laying on my back underneath the truck. So I'll keep going like this. This looks achievable so far. So once again, I'm faced with pulling out the cap that I just forced all the way up in there. Got the vice grips on there. I'll tap the vice grips with the hammer and see if I can pop that cap off, and the rest is pretty straightforward from there. Notice on that Zork, that's a little spring coming out of there. I can maybe salvage this U-joint, keep it as a sample. The next time I need to do U-joints, take that into the parts shop, make sure they give me the right thing. Okay, normally I would set this yoke up resting on a 4x4, and this is an 1.25 inch socket. You can see the cap would fit right in there, and I'd set that down, put this part of the yoke on top of this, and then pound on the uncovered side of that U-joint with the impact socket until I pop this cap out the other end. But this might be the yoke that's connected to the differential, so I'm going to push it out with the ball joint press instead of hitting it with a hammer. That would be kind of hard to do laying on my back, holding this end up with my hand and holding at a socket there and on and on. So let's try it with the ball joint press instead of the hammer. Well, I gotta say, it just pushed that right on out of there. I really do have to get me one of these things. This looks a lot better than beating on that thing with a hammer. Just feels more professional, you know. Well, that universal joint's out. All the caps go right back on there, except for this one. Mainly because there's some needle bearings laying in the cap. Gotta be sure when I put the new one in, their needle bearings are standing upright like good little soldiers. I want to see this yoke. This rubber seal here does have a little dry rot damage. I've got new seals, new bearings, new U-joints, all that stuff, so this will get the new treatment when it goes back on. I'm going to clean all this up, put it back together, and take on the third U-joint. I just thought I'd show you there. Spiders made a little bit of a nest in here underneath these seals. Never know what you're going to find. Take something apart, and I'll get this all cleaned up. What I've done is sprayed these yokes with a rust treatment. It's already starting to turn black. Cleaned it up best I could, and sprayed her down with the rust treatment. And I'll clean that off a little bit and hit it with some primer and some black paint before I put the new U-joint in. Okay, here's what I've got to deal with. Just a slip joint on this side. Looks like the press will fit in there vertically. Get these clips out of here all the way around. Some people would cut that out with a torch, and it looks perfectly safe and reasonable to do, but I'm not going to try that. I'm going to try the press. See what kind of progress I can make on that. Okay, I chose to knock out the retainers on the part of the U-joint that will allow me to remove the slip joint part of the yoke. I've positioned the press in the only way it can possibly fit in there, and I've locked out the Okay, I took a fairly moderate strain on this. You can see it's popped. I heard it just the same way as when I did the passenger side one. My concern now is that press fits in there so tightly that if I continue pushing that cap out, I might not be able to remove the press. So I think I'll back it off and tap it with a hammer, see if I can move it easily with that. Alright, I've rotated this back around. You can see the cap is just barely protruding out of the end of the yoke now. I had to put the press back on there. The hammer wasn't moving it at all. When I did it the first time, I put a strain on it and I wrapped the yoke with the hammer. That's when it popped the first time and was flush with the yoke. I put the press back on there, put a fairly healthy strain on it again, and wrapped the yoke with the hammer again, and now the cap is just protruding past the end of the yoke. So I'm gonna put it on there some more. After I looked at it a little closer, looks like I can get the press in and out of there all right. So I'll press a little bit more out, make sure I can get the press out and see what happens. Okay, that's how far I got the cap out. Interestingly, it didn't come out smoothly. Every time I would take a strain, then it would snap and jump out. That's about as far in as I can push that U-joint. So now I'm going to put the vice grips on there, see if I can get that cap off. Okay, cap came right off. I'm going to pound on that now and see if I can get this other one out of here. Alright, rather than pound that out, I'm going to use the press and force the cap back out the other side. The trick, if you can call it a trick, is that press only really fits in there one way. You can see maybe the yoke, where this slip yoke is, and you got interference here with these nuts on either side, and there's pretty much only one way to put that in there, but it does fit and there's enough room to get back out of there when you pop the cap. So looks like this is going to work out. I'm going to press that out of there and see if I can pull the slip yoke out. Okay, it's out. Problem is that last cap, top busted out of it. So it was a bitch getting it out of there. Basically I used the press and a 3/4 inch impact socket and forced it back up through there. So because I elected to take those caps off first, now I have the slip yoke in here, and put it in a vise, try to press the rest of this U-joint out of here. The interesting thing is there really wasn't anything wrong with this U-joint other than it was original factory equipment from 1989, 26 years ago. And as long as I was doing the ball joints, change it now while I got nice weather. So let's press this out and get everything cleaned up. Okay, I just wanted to point out here, having pressed this through, in order for that cap to come out through the recess in your press, notice how this lines up here with the yoke. I point that out now because when you're putting that on from underneath the truck, you're going to have to put your finger up there and make sure that that's lined up. And that way when you put pressure on it, you know the cap's going to escape into that recess. Alright, this U-joint's almost out of there. I'm going to clean all this up and give it a paint job and put it back together. Okay, got this all cleaned up. Got my U-joint mounted in the other yoke. Just slip this in there with the press, put it back together. Well, compared to what it took to get it out of there, it went in without any drama. You can see this has a zerk fitting at the cap, so I'll need a needle in the end of the grease gun to grease this. So it can be done putting in this center U-joint on a Dana 50 from underneath in your driveway. Don't want to hear any whining about it.